One of the horror darlings of the moment, Victorian Psycho by Virginia Feito, is pitched as Jane Eyre meets American Psycho, which are large and honestly surprising shoes to fill. So, all things considered, does it make the cut? Hi, I'm Olivia. This is AV Club, where I talk about horror books and literary fiction, and today I'm doing a horror book review of Victorian Psycho. I have been on a very lucky streak of incredible and sometimes grotesque historical fiction lately between Perfume by Patrick Süskind, which takes place about 100 years earlier than Victorian Psycho in France and follows Grenouille, who has the keenest sense of smell for all smells, from the finest perfumes to the most deplorable and base human and animal waste odors, which leads him into a life that is surrounded by death, both intentional and not, and to, yes, a life of murder. Grenouille is someone who lives on the outside of the limits of polite society. Then there's also my new favorite book, Fingersmith by Sarah Waters, who also features characters who are outside the limits of polite society. The characters are petty criminals and thieves and scam artists and pornographers set in Victorian era London and the English countryside. There's so much lush language and taboo and attraction to people that you really have no business being attracted to. So, Victorian Psycho really came to me at the right time because I wanted more historical fiction, especially Victorian era grotesque fiction and stuff that is really both gnarly and gorgeous and lush. I was looking for more books in this realm, but it also could be setting me up for disaster if it didn't reach the levels of these other new favorites that I just read. Victorian Psycho follows Winifred Naughty, who has become a governess for a family. She's had a mysterious, obscure past that is slowly revealed to you throughout the book, but seems to feature also death that has followed along the way throughout her growing up, from being in school to being young, and there's just something different about her. She's the governess to two young children, the elder of which, Drusilla, is a young girl who also seems a bit odd. What I like about the story is that from the get go, Winifred is a freak. She doesn't make any apologies for it, she's never moralizing about it. There's just, she just experiences the world in a different way and seeks to enact pain and misfortune on others. She seems curious about what the consequences for some actions may be, like whenever she's at school and she feeds dead birds to her classmates. She also seems to be experiencing an attraction to Mr. Pounds, the father of the household. She has more of a relationship with him, who is clearly attracted to her, especially because he is a huge proponent of phrenology and loves to measure skulls. And if you're not familiar with phrenology, it's a very racist, junk science of measuring skulls to understand the temperament of people or to understand their intelligence. And he's obsessed with how much Winifred validates his love of phrenology, but also because their skulls seem to be identical. And so that must mean that she is a very good person. The mother of the house is, of course, not pleased with this and is more of a source of tension for Winifred. Not that she really experiences tension though, because it seems like nothing really bothers her. That she has a mission in this house, that is, an unknown mission to us, but why she wanted to be in this house, how she, was able to get rid of the previous governess in the house, which reminds me a bit of the plot of Fingersmith and how they were able to substitute a maid in a in an English countryside for nefarious reasons. So there really are a lot of plot elements that I like. It's also a pretty short book. I read it on ebook and I think it was about 160 pages, so it went pretty fast. And there's not really a lot of plot to speak of. And I do think that if I were to have a critique of this book, that that would be it. That I like these characters and I like their interactions and I like being in the world, but it is not quite different snapshots in time, but there's not really a story that you're following. It's just more the weird interactions of the characters in this family leading up to Christmas time when visitors are coming to stay in the house. I don't want to give away all of the terrible things that Winifred does, but I will say that they are very consistent throughout the book and that they do elevate in terms of the grandness of her actions, that she is almost like an uncompromising artist of her evil nature. I also love too her relationship with Drusilla. I think that's where I wanted more plot, was because I think that Drusilla was a really interesting character and I would love to know more about what she chooses to do with her life after the end of the events in this book. In a way, it's hard to review just because it's so much about just the experience of it. I will say that it's not quite so American Psycho, that is kind of a stretch. She does really terrible things, uh, but there's nothing that's hard to read in the same way that things really were kind of hard to read in American Psycho. Is it like Jane Eyre? I don't think it's really like Jane Eyre. I think that that comparison is just to give a buzzword for people that are not familiar with reading a lot of historical fiction about like the time period. I mean, it's set in a house and it's kind of weird. Jane Eyre does revolve so much about being inside the house and what that means. Honestly, the themes are more similar to American Psycho than they really are to Jane Eyre, in my opinion. Where if you read American Psycho, I think if you're like me and you're one of the people who prefers the movie American Psycho to the book and the way that the director was able to pull a new story out of the events of American Psycho, then I think that you might like Victorian Psycho. American Psycho really looks at the emptiness of capitalism and how, at the top of the career ladder, which is supposed to be your end goal, really the accomplishments that you have to your name are only your physique that no one cares about, a list of references, your apartment that has no friends or love in it. And yeah, that's really sad. Victorian Psycho, on the other hand, really is more of a feminist story that, yeah, it's kind of feminist to be a freak, that she does not feel like she has to fit inside of any mold, especially the mold that was expected of women at this time was very limiting. And I didn't mention this book is very funny. I laughed out loud multiple times in this book, and I don't think I ever laugh during books at all. But it's like one of those funny books where there's just so much irony that's in the text, as well as just how absurd it is. The expectations that were put on women and really still exist for women today in ways that it honestly makes more sense to be a murderess, to be living in such a violent way whenever that's the society that you're put against. Like, why wouldn't people act out? This isn't a revenge story. She seems to be consistently evil throughout the story, despite anything else, that it's not all revenge. But she has been wronged in some ways, and it does speak to her character, but it's not her driving force, I would say. I feel like her driving force is really something that's inherent to her. And I think that was really important for my enjoyment of the story, that it was not a revenge story, that her character arc and character change didn't come as an insult to her, because it was so much about just a truly horrible woman. If you like something like that, but you want to read something that is more like American Psycho, that is like truly nasty, the most evil woman ever. I would recommend Tampa by Alissa Nutting, kind of like a Lolita story, but told from a female adult perspective. It follows a teacher and she's a predator of a child in her class. It's so dark and upsetting. Um, and I totally understand that that's not a book that a lot of people would want to read. It is much more taboo and truly disgusting, deplorable than the things that happen in this book, which are more kind of over the top and campy, like Terrifier at times, rather than anything that makes you feel icky, if that makes sense. But if you want something that is more unhinged, then maybe check out Tampa. Anyway, this all goes to say that I really did enjoy this book. I didn't give it 5 stars. I feel like a lot of people are really into this book in a way that I think because it followed so closely on the tail of stuff that I really loved and our new all time favorites, it didn't quite measure up to that for me in this time. But I understand the point of view of really loving this book. I haven't read any negative reviews of it, which is kind of surprising just because it is kind of aimless in its plotting in a way that I'm okay with. It's so much about the atmosphere, and there are just a lot of textures in this book. It is funny, it's dark, and I feel like a lot of people really do just want to plot. But if you're more into just like a weird atmosphere, then maybe check out Victorian Psycho. Anyway, thank you for listening to me talk about this book. If you have any other recommendations for weird historical fiction that's along these lines, I am still on the hunt for more of them because I have been loving it this year and I cannot get enough of it. But I'll be back again soon to talk more about books, so I will talk to you then. Bye.